And I'm gonna try to make this a quick one today, not again 2 hours. So let's jump right in and see what we get. So first,
A quick one. Like 10 points, 40 minutes. Quick one.
I'm going to talk about the actual proposed changes by Blizzard and what I think about them, if I agree or don't. And after that, I'm going to also include some suggestions of mine, which I think could be done additionally to these changes already. And right at the start, I guess I can say that most of these changes, almost all of these changes, I think I agree with some little tweaks. And let's get into it right away. Immolation has been the big star of the patch. Of course, Blizzard intends to nerf it once more with increased mana cost, going from 7 to 8. This is something that they already were intending for the previous patch.
True.
But then people spoke out against it, thinking that would be too much of a nerf. And that was also me, by the way. So I was wrong last time. I thought going from 6 to 8 mana would be way too much, but we've been seeing many more Demon Hunter games, and with the current mana per second of 7, it seems like the mana cost is still too low for how much damage they're actually doing. Of course, Immolation can have huge DPS and damage throughout a game, as we've seen numerous times. So yeah, I was wrong here. The mana cost should be higher, I would say, and I agree with this. For how high the potential is for Immolation, for how much damage you can do with that, with the Demon Hunter also having so many other strengths, I think the mana increase here is definitely the right way to go. Alright, second change. Sentinel.
I found this interesting because before he said on Twitter that activation costs should be back, and I'm not really sure if this tackles the problem, because usually you creep a camp, right? You go through that burst phase of Immolation. And in the fight it's not really used, so I think there could be different screws where we weaken Immolation at a certain point of the game and not throughout the entire game than with the mana tick.
Research cost reduced from 100 to 50 lumber. That's of course the Sentinel upgrade for the Huntresses of Night Elf. And I think that's a good call. Night Elves were hit in the early game pretty hard with a Huntress build, because Ultravision nowadays does require tier 2. Can't get it so easily anymore. So that build was significantly weakened. So this should help make it a bit better. Is that necessary balance-wise? Is this required in especially Night Elf versus Orc? Not sure. I feel like we need more sample size, but I think just logically speaking, this makes sense, and I agree with this one as well. All right, next one. Arcane Tower feedback
Now I'm really curious, by the way.
increased from 12 to 18 on heroes. Only on heroes. Arcane Tower will still be the same on units and summons, but on heroes it's been increased. This means it burns more mana from heroes, and it does more damage to heroes with mana. And I think that's the right call. The human base has been the most fragile, the most exploitable out of all the 4 races for a long time. We all know the peasant suffering, and I think...
Wait, I didn't listen because I was distracted by chat, sorry.
And summons, but on heroes it's been increased. This means it burns more mana from heroes, and it does more damage to heroes with mana. And I think that's the right call. The human base has been the most fragile, the most exploitable out of all the 4 races for a long time. We all know the peasant suffering, and I think this is a good way to try to mitigate some of that suffering. It's not a big buff, honestly, because again, it only affects heroes, but
I think it's a huge buff!
what it mostly affects, and I think what it's intended to address the most, is the Demon Hunter harass. Demon Hunter Immolation harass, you've seen it plenty of times. This will help dealing with the demon much easier, and might also make the humans not have to require 2 arcanes anymore. They don't always have 2 arcanes, but sometimes they do against Demon Hunter harass. Now perhaps only 1. This is something that humans can play around with. A stronger arcane tower, I think, is the right call. Also, I don't think it's a big risk for tower pushes. We don't want to enter into a tower push meta again, of course, because that is mostly about guard towers and about tower build time. So I think also this is a good change.
Whoa, I expected heavier backlash on this. Because this is pretty crazy. We've seen the videos. I'm not sure if Remo saw the videos that we've seen, but it is really strong. So of course, Remo knows way more about the game than I do. But from what I've seen, from what I've gathered, I think this is crazy. Also, it's not only against this harass, it's also against the lich harass, it's also against the keeper harass. It's against all sorts of hero harasses. Like, not only targeted immediately towards the demon hunter. Neo, show my graph. Okay, which one? Arcane Tower change. How fast would a level 1 demon or pit lord be empty of mana? This one, Dondo? This one? Demon Hunter mana is blue and red. 3 seconds. This one is the one you mean, right? So you would deplete 3 seconds faster. How much damage is that? If a demon hunter is depleting 3 seconds faster. Like 40 damage? Roundabout? 40 times the number of targets. 3 seconds is quite a bit. For a pit lord, it's 1 second. If they cast one spell, pit lord, or have immolation active, the age is emptied of mana after 10 seconds, 36 less damage. Okay, that's a cool graph. Okay, then it's not that. I mean, 36 per target, of course, right? I think this is big. I think this is a big change. So maybe more implications than a lot of people think it is. Not as crazy as I thought it is, but still meaningful. It's a big buff to the feedback. So I think Remo underestimates how much of a deal this is.
This is the first change that I'm going to disagree with. Sundering Blades intending to be nerfed from 15% bonus damage to 10% bonus damage. I can understand the idea here. Undeads have been suffering quite a bit more against humans recently, and knights indeed can do crazy damage to fiends.
Yeah.
But I would say 2 things. First of all, Undeads are still trying to experiment what to go with. Perhaps moving away from fiend-based armies is the right approach. We've been seeing some of that, but not too much of it yet. I feel like there is still an experimentation window here that we should give time to develop.
Question in chat, what is Sundering Blades? Sundering Blades is a passive ability of knights that gives them more damage towards medium armor units, like, for example, fiends or spellbreakers or whatever.
And secondly, the matchup seems to be pretty fine at the moment. It seems to be pretty 50-50, with both races saying that they're weaker, which is normally a great sign.
It's not 50-50.
Both sides feel that they are disadvantaged. But it certainly isn't heavily human favored. I think that much is fair to say. And considering that this match...
I think it's pretty... I think a lot of people agree. That's not only me. It's not only me. It's also people like Scars and other people saying that human is certainly favored versus undead at this time.
Matchup has been so undead favored for such a long time. I think we can give the humans some time to enjoy, their new status without nerfing them too much. Now, to be fair, this is not a big nerf. This is indeed a small nerf, but I don't think it's necessary. And also, it disincentivizes human a bit more, especially in Human Mirror, where knights are great against breakers. This is going to make them a little less great, might disincentivize tier 3 a bit more, might make us stuck on tier 2 more. So, I do not like this change. I disagree with this one. In fact, I would rather do the flip side and buff knights a bit more.
What?
I would like to see Animal War Train available on tier 2, not just
Still?
on tier 3. That way,
Are you
on
mad?
the way to tier 3, you could research Animal War Training, and then when you are on tier 3 and you produce knights, you can already have the upgrade. Same goes for Griffins and Dragonhawks.
Why? I mean, this is a little cliche. because a lot of people are saying that Neo is always against human buffs, but who says that knights need a buff? They're amazing.
That would be a meaningful buff, by the way, that animal war training. I don't think it would go too far, though, because human still seems to be the weakest of the 4 races, although not as huge of a disparity as in the past, I would say. All right, next, nerf. Troll headhunters being reduced in HP. I think this is correct. Last patch, the troll headhunters were nerfed.
It's so funny. So far, Remo and I are on the exact opposite side of things on pretty much everything. I think immolation nerf is not the correct way to tackle it. I think the Arcane Tower buff is big. I think Sundering Blades buff is correct. And I think Troll Headhunter nerf is incorrect. So it is 4 out of 5 where we disagree to each other.
A little bit, but just 2 seconds of production time, which turned out to be not that big of a deal. A little bit, especially early game, when it comes to applying a lot of pressure early with lots of headhunters, especially against human, we saw a little effect, but in terms of their actual cost efficiency, they have stayed the same. And I would say they are still a little bit too cost efficient. And they are the ranged unit that does lots of damage. With Berserk, they also have this fantasy, so hitting them in the survivability department, I think makes sense. Minus 25 HP, I think this is a really good value to aim at. And yeah, it's, 8% HP, right? So it's not crossing that 10% threshold. I think this makes sense. All right, pulverize.
All right, so I think Remo always wants to see more variety, right? So I think this nerf will not result in more variety in anything. We're gonna see a lot of Panda that just smokes the headhunters and maybe not really render them useless, but make them too fragile. So yeah, I disagree.
Taurens are very underplayed. Also happen to be one of my favorite units. But yeah, we never see Taurens, so giving them some help to be played more makes sense. But this is like nothing. 25 lumber on tier 3. In the early game, 25 lumber can matter. 50 lumber in the early game is a big deal. In the late game, this doesn't matter at all. The game has been running at that point for like 8, 9, 10 minutes. 25 lumber that deep into a game means nothing. Unless perhaps in a really close game where you are perfectly managing your lumber, I feel like this is not the right way to approach it. This is way too little impact. I would rather say, make the Taurens just cheaper right out the gate. If we give Tauren crazy abilities, like, for example, resistance skin or more move speed, both of which that had been suggestions by me before, those would be a big buff and huge help, but we don't know exactly if that would make them too crazy, too strong. So I think the most reasonable thing to do would just be reduce the cost of Taurens. And the easiest thing here to target is gold, because gold is normally, in almost all cases, the limiting factor resource. At the moment, Taurens cost 280 gold. If we reduce that to 250 gold, I think that would be a much more appreciated help than this one, which really, this does basically nothing.
I, once again, kind of disagree here. We agree that making Tauren and their upgrades more accessible is the right thing to do, but I, in general, disagree that late game lumber is no issue for orcs. Especially in the late game, lumber is an issue for orcs because they want to pull the peons for something. Gold is not really a limiting factor because if they want to, they can get an expo and get gold that way. And upgrades are super expensive. An additional building would be expensive in lumber. Pulverized upgrade would be expensive, and also like armor upgrades would be expensive in lumber. I think lumber is indeed, and that is something I learned from FFA, a very limiting factor. You could always solve that with a shredder, of course, but do you really want to put in a shredder for stuff like this? I don't think so. So, once again, I disagree.
All right, moving on. Cannibalization. Is it called cannibalization or cannibalize?
Cannibalize.
I think it's called cannibalize.
Yep.
But anyways, we all know what it is. Cannibalize for ghouls and A-bombs getting buffed big time. Cost reduced by 25 gold. And research time, this is the big one, reduced by 50%. This is really big. This is so much that I feel like it might be too much. I think I would like to see, the gold cost here is fine. I think the research time to 20 seconds might be better because halving the research time is a big deal. Now, Cannibalize, of course, isn't a big upgrade to ghouls inside fights, so it doesn't increase the power level in engagements too much. There's always the thing you have to be careful about the most when it comes to buffs. But yeah, this opens up new opportunities for Undead to play. Maybe use the ghouls for tanking. Maybe you are less reliant on summons, less reliant on Ritual Dagger. So yeah, this is a good change to go for. And one would think this shouldn't be too strong. But yeah, this is something we never see, so makes sense. This could also be a big buff for A-bombs, by the way.
Yes.
I feel like Cannibalize is way underutilized on A-bombs.
Yes.
But yeah, well, we would have to see about that.
We agree on something. Nice! Who would have thought? I'm a little more cautious when it comes to the buff, because I think that can save undeads a lot of time with ghouls on the map. But it would also be a nice way to play. It's a new tool for undead. I also think that the buff on the research time is a little bit too strong. But in general, I agree that incentivize, cannibalize is a good thing. In general, I also think it is one of these abilities that is underrated, and a push by the devs towards that ability will make players realize how good it actually is to then use that ability, if that makes sense. By the way, thank you Commodore Neckbeard for the support. 500 bits, damn! Slayday, thank you for the 26-month, lol the title. Gifted sub by Commodore Neckbeard as well, and Save Orcas, 3 euros. Why so many players are against small, non-impactful changes? It is great to have such changes. We should welcome minor quality of life changes. Not every change in the balance patch has to be impactful, right? I'm not really sure what you're addressing with this. But yeah, quality of life would be great indeed. I agree with chat, by the way, that 25 lumber isn't much, but it's a little bit that helps. So I think pushing it in the right direction is good. Remo's comment of pulverize. I don't think he's against that. Like, he's saying that it isn't enough. If I got this correctly.
All right, next change. This one's going to be a bit complicated.
Prediction. We definitely disagree on this one. I'm curious.
And this one is going to be a bit controversial as well. I agree with this change a lot.
Oh! What? I did not expect this. I agree with this a lot too. And a lot of people are against it, but for very weird and unreasonable reasons.
But I might be in the minority here. Let me explain.
Yes, Remo. Tell them.
Caster, of course, I've seen tons of games, and I've seen many, many games be awarding seemingly unfair advantages to one player early game.
Yes!
What does that mean? Well, especially when you have a mirror match, you see this all the time. Both players play Blade Master. It's an org mirror. The one finds claws, claws, gloves. The other finds ring, ring, ring.
Yes!
Very bad.
He gets it.
Very bad. Very unfair. One Blade Master, obviously, way, way stronger, especially when it comes to creeping, but also when it comes to fighting. Now, Rings of Protection are oftentimes good late-game items if the hero is a frontliner and you need him to be protected, but that is not always the case. Plus, of course, also rings in the early game normally pretty bad.
Yes.
Whereas damage is always, always, always good. For that reason, claws are always a premium, but also circlet.
Exactly.
And I agree that claws should be weakened to make it more in line with Ring of Protection and Gloves of Haste. I think in a vacuum, this would be perfect. Claws +4 and gloves and ring +3. I think they would all be around the same power level.
It's exactly what I said.
But now comes the issue. Circlet of Nobility is going to be by far the best item now.
It's exactly what I said.
The best item if this change goes through. So we're going to have 3 items on the same power level and Circlet clearly above. And that's also not a perfect solution.
But that's not the problem of the clause, that's the problem of the circlet. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have to nerf clause.
I guess. Couple of PTR patches back, there was a suggestion to have circlets not give 2/2/2 stats, but 2/1/1 stats. I think there was also a suggestion that was given by me, but the community really didn't like it, especially because it was toggleable. You could click the circlets and then switch through the attributes, meaning that when you pick up the circlet, it gives 2 strength, but if you click it, it gives 2 agility and then 2 intelligence, kind of like in Dota, where you can toggle through the different stat bonuses. At first, I thought that would be a cool idea to min-max your character, your hero, but yeah, I was wrong about that one as well, because I realized from input of others that that is too cumbersome. If you want to be super efficient, you have to swap through your circlets all the time. And if you have multiple circlets, you have to do it through all the circlets all the time.
Yes, that's the big difference compared to power threads in Dota. And power threads in Dota is 1 item for 1 hero. And in Warcraft 3, it could be up to 6 items for 1 hero or separate, etc. Plus, it was incredibly bugged and you were able to stack your ability points so that we were all against the toggle, but no one really disagreed with the circlet nerf.
That is too annoying, too cumbersome. And, you know, in Warcraft 3, we're proud of our micromanagement and maximizing every single ability and, you know, aspect of the game. But that is too much.
Yes.
Circlet swapping all the time, that is not fun. So I will agree that was a bad idea by me to make them toggleable through the different stat points. But I think what would be good here, along with this change, would be just make the circlet give 2 attributes to the main stat and 1 attribute each to the non-main stat of the hero. So in a DK, it would give 2 strength, 1 int, 1 agi. And on an archmage, it would give 1 strength, 1 agi, and 2 int.
So the problem here, I think this is a solid suggestion. The problem here is, for example, a Shadow Hunter. It's not always that you want the main stat as your primary stat is not always the most important stat. For example, a Shadow Hunter would rather have more mana than more agility. For a DK, you can debate it, but I would rather have a boost to my mana in the early game, maybe. Okay, a DK is probably a bad example, but let's go with the Shadow Hunter, where you want intelligence over agility, and there, when it always automatically boosts the main stat, I think that's not good.
Right, that's what that means. Now, I don't know how easy that is to code. I think it is doable, but I feel like the community may not be so in favor of these changes. I think it's the correct thing to do, though. If we weaken clause of attack +5 and weaken circlet, then these first additional item drops are a lot more balanced. And I think it's going to be a lot less luck involved in the early game in actual matches.
Yeah.
So,
my opinion, my suggestion was 3 different circlets. 1 circlet for 2/1/1, 1 for 1/2/1, and 1 for 1/1/2. Needs different icons, I guess, maybe color change or whatever. But 3 different circlets that in total mirror the drop rate of circlets now is my way to go. I think automatically main stat is not great, but in general, Remo and I are on the very, very same page here. Just shortly before the finish line, take different turns, and that's totally fair. And I think his way to argue about early game item drops is the right one.
Yeah, like I said, either give the circlet 2/1/1. Another solution would be increase the gold cost.
Save Orcas, mapmaker, knowledgeable dude, says then you need 3 different circlets in the shop. And here comes in a suggestion that I got from Lawlight, because of course I'm talking about a lot with Lawlight. Lawlight suggested to keep the circlet with 2/2/2 in the shop, make it a little more expensive though. And I think that is very good. I think that's very, very good. Just keep the 2/2/2 circlet in the shop, but not in the drop table.
of the circlet. If the circlet is the best item of that tier, and we don't want to change that, we want to keep it at 222 instead of 211 on the circlet, then the gold value should be increased.
Yes,
I think.
exactly.
Circlet is also an item you can buy at the shop. At the moment, it's 175 gold. I think it should be 200 gold.
Agree.
That would be kind of a band-aid solution, though, because the circlet would still be the best item you can get from that table, but at least when you buy it, it's more expensive. It's not really an elegant solution. That's the problem with this change. Again, like I said, I agree with this a lot, but it's hard to make this change perfectly elegant and balanced.
Yeah.
And that is just within this drop table, within the circlet, gloves, claws, ring drop table. Now it becomes even weirder, because it semi-competes with another drop table. The little green camps that give Cloak of Shadows and Slippers and Gauntlets and Mantle. These are oftentimes in competition because they're both easy to creep for the most part. If this goes through, things get strange. Because Claws of Attack now gives +4, which means that the lower level item suddenly is going to be better than Claws. What does that mean?
That depends.
That means that Slippers +3 are going to be better than Claws. Mantle +3 is going to be better than Claws. Even Gauntlets +3 is going to be better than Claws. Because you don't just get the damage, you also get HP, or attack speed, or armor, or mana. You know? So the one attack here isn't going to be enough to separate this item from the lower drop table. And this is where things get wonky. This is why I say it's weird to get this change perfect.
Okay, let me chip in here because I heard this a lot from the community. The thing is that claws are universally good on almost all heroes. You attack always with the hero, especially in the early game. With Mantle, with Gauntlets, and with Slippers, you still have a chance that the item doesn't fit your hero. So if you have a Blade, is it Blade Master? Yeah, if you have a Blade Master, of course the Slippers would be fantastic, but Mantle would still be more or less trash. So there's a higher RNG that the item that you find on the lower level drop table is fitting your hero, while Claws of Attack are universally good.
Again, for the third time, I say I agree with this change, but only if also Circlet is addressed, and if also Slippers and Mantle and Gauntlets are addressed. So, I would suggest, along with a Slippers, with a Circlet nerf, we also need a Slippers nerf. I think Slippers and Mantle and Gauntlets need to go from from +3 to +2. That way, these items from this drop table would still be clearly better than the other items. That, of course, means that Slippers and Gauntlets and all those items will be a lot weaker. Going from +3 stats to +2 stats is going to be a big nerf. This will have metagame implications, for sure. But, of course, it's a change that affects every hero.
Okay, I do see where he's coming from. And probably balance-wise okay, but we are running into a psychological problem here by now. And this is something that Chili Cheeseburger, for example, says in chat right now. All I hear is nerf, nerf, nerf. Yes, that turns into a problem. Because we make everything weaker, and that weakens the fun as well to a degree if you find that if you get that good RNG. And fun in a game should be almost the number one priority if it's still balanced. So we've gone this nerf route for a long time. And I'm a little afraid that if we continue to go this route, then at some point things will appear meaningless. And you don't have that special feeling of finding an item that fits you. Because if we want the perfect balance, then just get rid of all the items and all the RNG. And this is not great. It's not great. I see where he's coming from. Totally understandable from a certain point of view, but I don't like it.
So it should be kind of balanced across the board, but not exactly. Because some heroes are much more stat reliant than others. Standout examples are, for instance, Farseer,
Fun is the #1 priority. Balance only purpose is fun. That's a good take. But you gotta balance the fun. Like, if one player has fun, for example, a demon hunter with immolation running into your peasant line. One player certainly has fun. The other player, really not fun, right? Yeah.
Archmage, DK, these are all great heroes, great first heroes as well, that do well without any bonus stats. If you get bonus stats, that's fine, that's good, but they also function well without any. Whereas there are other heroes which really need bonus stats. Blade Master, especially, also Demon Hunter, maybe Warden, but most of the time, especially the agility heroes, need bonus stats. Which means, if we nerf all these items, we also kind of nerf the agility heroes. And again, that's why I say it's hard to make these changes perfectly.
Yes.
The way I see it, the intention here by Blizzard is to make this item drop table more balanced and less luck dependent. And again, I agree with that, but there are a lot of things to consider here.
Exactly. To add to that, in a lot of games, you have power creep for a reason. Things always get better. For example, in trading card games, for example, you always need to give people like a reason to buy new packs in that regard, because the new cards are better than the others. And then you have power creep to unlimited numbers. Also in like MMORPGs, you have the same. And Warcraft 3 goes the opposite route, which is psychologically really bad. It is tough. It has a lot of implications, that's true. But at this point, when we discuss the depth, or on such depth as Remo's trying to go into here right now on a kind of superficial level, we basically have to redo all of Warcraft, I think.
This one is much easier to consider, I think. This is also proper. Claws of Attack +9 are by far the best item from that drop, from that camp. You know, in some cases.
I also think, adding to this, it's not only edgy heroes. Like, damage is very good on int heroes as well in early games, like in or range heroes especially. Like, go away from the main stat thing, but an Archmage who can go for chip damage or more chip damage is very important. Same goes for Keeper, same goes for Farseer, same goes for Lich. So range versus melee, there's also a difference.
And again, I agree with that, but there are a lot of things to consider here. This one is much easier to consider, I think. This is also proper. Claws of Attack +9 are by far the best item from that drop, from that camp. You know, in some cases, Talisman of Evasion, Ring can also be really good, but for the most part, this is, the best item you can hope for. I also think it's too strong, and honestly, I think this could be nerfed even more. I think +9 is way too high. I think +8 is still too high. I think these Claws of Attack could go from +9 to +7 and still be really good, especially if the other claws are +4. Additionally, something we've seen over the last few years, Ring of Regeneration in the early game is super, super good. So good that it's perhaps too good. I think, because this is the same drop table as the Claws +9, I think the Ring of Regen should also be reduced from +2 hit point regeneration to +1.5 hit point regeneration, along with the Claws being nerfed from +9 to +.
Again, we go into the mode of nerfing everything to streamline stuff. Again, I think wrong route. Super crazy idea. And this is not a suggestion. This is just a, hey, maybe we could think about it. How about we buff all HP across the board to minimize the impact of stuff like Claws? And also to stuff like Ring of Regeneration stuff. If everything in the game has more HP, then a +1 damage is less meaningful. Not saying that we should do this, but we can think about it. That would, of course, automatically render area of effect a little bit weaker, nuke, etc. So there's a lot of implications, but it was a shower thought that I had, not by much, just by a bit.
7. All right. I keep looking at the watch because I'm going to have to cast soon. So again, I'm going to go through this quickly. Potion of Greater Mana being nerfed from 250 to 200. That's absolutely correct. Potion of Greater Mana has huge impact. By far the best item, too strong. I agree with this wholeheartedly. However, I would also say that the Mana Stone should also be reduced from 250 to 200 because that one is also, just like the Mana Potion, very, very good.
That's a no-brainer.
Speaking about that item table, Mana Stone, then also the heal wards there should be reduced from two charges to 1 charge. Just like the Wand of the Wind was a while ago.
Again, nerf.
Auto Mana Stealing was buffed in the last patch. I think it's...
How about... since this is again like a nerf on stuff and the anti-power creep is rampant, how about we just in general give a bigger variety of items? Like, it's kind of weird that we have Cyclone, like we have certain abilities built into items and others we don't. Why is that? Why do we have Wand of Mana Steal but not a Wand of Lifesteal? Why do we have Cyclone Staff but not a Cripple Staff? Wouldn't a bigger variety with maybe only, depending on the spell, 1 or 2 charges, balance things out a little bit as well?
Quite OP in the early game. Mid-game, late game, when there are more sources of mana regen, the Wand of Mana Stealing is fine, but early game he's crazy strong. I think we could just go back to the old Wand of Mana Steal, just make it 50, and that would still have it in a decent place. But I appreciate the realization that the Wand of Mana Stealing is definitely too good at the moment. -5 mana isn't a big nerf. I think we just go back to 50, and with the mana here, with the big mana in mind, I think that would be fine. But, this is okay. And finally, Lightning Shield removed from the item drop table. Lots of players over the years have complained about the Lightning Shield, and indeed in the early game, in the main base, it can be very tough to deal with, especially for humans. Normally it's always the humans lobbying against Lightning Shield. I always find it a bit sad when items are removed, because, it adds some flavor to the game, it adds some variety to the game. I can understand the argument, certainly, because it can be frustrating, but I also think people are overreacting.
Now that I just had the idea of more spells built into items, I realize what a hypocrite I am that I agreed with the removal of the Lightning Shield. Yep, I agree. Hypocrite, Neo.
There are ways to play around Lightning Shield. It's perhaps not the easiest, but it is possible. I don't think this is necessary, to be honest. At the same time, it won't be a huge detriment to the game if it's removed. But yeah, I think this is not really necessary, especially considering that on the pro level, we only have very few maps where actually Lightning Shield is droppable.
Yeah, because the map makers removed it from the drop table because it was imbalanced.
Like Northern Isles and Titaners. Is it still dropping on Echo Isles 2.0?
Nope.
I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't think this is necessary. That's just me. I'm willing to go with a majority here. If people feel like Lightning Shield should be removed, then okay, fair enough. All right,
Remo's given up.
Proposed balance changes and what I think about them. 20 minutes only. Man, I really am quite quick today.
We're halfway.
Right, and now,
there we go.
My suggestions.
Yes, let's go.
All these changes that
Here
I
we
talked about
go. Okay, what can top the Tinker suggestion of last time? I'm really curious. Let's go.
Which I think can go through. I already outlined what I think could be done additionally. Only the Sunring Blades I think I really disagree with. Now I will voice my suggestions of what I think should also be or could also be changed additionally for the different races and stuff.
Real quick before we go into this, because there was an interesting comment here by YGilo, I think. I think something to consider when nerfing buffing things is the entry barrier for new players. Putting things like 3 different circlets sounds great for pro play, but imagine someone picking up the game for the first time and finding out there's 500 items. That to you is Dota. And Dota is very, very popular. They just patched... They had the biggest patch in years. It's basically a new game, and it's very popular. I don't think that's an issue at all.
We're starting off with Night Elf, who are, of course, the big patch winners of the current 1.35. Now, this is something that I imagine Night Elves won't be too happy with me proposing, but I think it would be the right thing to do. Mana burn is a greatly limiting ability that discounts like half of the hero cast. Mana burn, I think, is just, from its very design, not a healthy mechanic for the game. But, you know, here we are now. We are 20 years into Warcraft 3, so I guess it's here to stay. And I guess there is a justification for Night Elf to have this ability. But what changed in the newest patch was that the Demon Hunter has, along with being a good anti-hero champion, I'm using the word here, forgive my non-eloquence, he's got so many strengths at the moment. Demon Hunter in the past always used to be a great late-game hero, scaling great with items and levels, and a great disabler through mana burn, and also a good damage dealer through the Orb of Venom, but used to be weak in the early game. But all that has incredibly changed with, of course, the new buffed version of Immolation. Now the Demon Hunter can creep super fast, level super fast, be very strong in the early game against peasants, footies, ghouls, maybe even headhunters. So the Demon Hunter has increased in power level and has been shaved off in terms of weaknesses. Demon Hunter at the moment has basically no weakness, which is the reason why we see him basically all the time. To be fair, against Orc nowadays, we've been seeing a lot more keeper play again, but even there, it's Demon Hunter second normally with talent play. I think
I disagree, especially in combination with another Immolation nerf. It's already, in my opinion, Night Elf is 50-50 versus Undead, depending on the map. It could be in a not so great spot against Orc, especially compared to previous patches. So burning the Demon Hunter on two sides, I don't think is great. I'd rather buff Warden.
I think the Demon Hunter has too many strengths, and it's just too strong to pass up, because at the moment there's almost no reason not to play a Demon Hunter. And if we consider that, plus the fact that mana burn is just kind of restrictive in its game design and frustrating, both. It's frustrating and restrictive. I think mana burn should be nerfed.
I don't know, man. This would also automatically, because you have to get closer to the enemy army, make him more fragile, because he loses range. Obviously, he's more fragile. I don't want the keeper back, really. I like the variety. There's very little to do against that. In general, I agree that mana burn isn't that great, but I would rather have more variety than back to keeper craft. That was annoying, and we had enough of it. So I'd rather go through a time of more demon craft than back to keeper craft. And in general, I'd love to see a buff for Warden,
like I say here, and have its range reduced from 300 to 250. This means it's still cheap to use in terms of mana on the demon itself. It's still very strong if you get the mana burn on key targets, but at least it's gonna be a little bit harder to get into range, and you have to expose yourself a bit more, and it allows more counterplay for the other player if the demon hunter tries to get in range for the burn.
Yeah,
so I think this would be a very healthy change indeed for the game. Additionally, I would suggest buffing the PotM. PotM is one of the weakest heroes in the game. We basically never see her. Only once in a blue moon do we see her in Night Elf Mirror, but even that is extremely rare nowadays. And very, very rarely we see her against Orc, especially nowadays with Talons.
Kevin says, Lamau, does he know how hard it is to get good burns versus strong undeads versus Aura Frost Arrow? Yeah, I agree. It looks easier than it probably is. I'm not in a position to make a judgment, but I can imagine.
Not so much. So I feel like Searing Arrow, while it does okay damage, it doesn't have the scaling of other orb effects normally, where with more army they become more effective. Searing Arrow, if you have more army, doesn't really matter. So I think a 20% damage increase across the board, that's a big deal, of course. 20% is a lot, but considering how underplayed the PotM is, I think this would be the right way to go to perhaps see PotM played more again, and hopefully also in different matchups where we haven't seen her before. And the second point is also, I would love to see the PotM's nighttime vision increased.
Yeah, I said
Every
this
unit in
before.
Warcraft 3 has more daytime vision than nighttime vision, unless you have ultra.
But isn't the flaw of the Searing Arrow that Orb of Venom is always better? Like, isn't that the reason we go for Aura and Owl oftentimes already, especially late? And I don't see, like, if you do the Searing Arrow change, this won't put the PotM as a better first hero. Because first heroes, oftentimes you want creep speed. I guess this is giving her a little bit more creep speed. Opening up expansions there doesn't do too much. Creating space, not too much. Yeah, I have very little hope for Searing. It wouldn't hurt, but it won't deal with the problem of how weak PotM is in comparison.
Ultra vision as Night Elf, then it's the same. Nighttime vision and daytime vision. I think it would be cool if there was one single hero with a unique trait of having nighttime vision that is the same as daytime vision. Daytime vision for the PotM, by the way, is also 1800. This would make the PotM the only hero in the game to have a lot of vision during nighttime as well, not needing the Ultra Vision upgrade, so she would have that unique ability on tier 1 already, which could give her a really unique tactical ability and an edge over other heroes.
Yeah, I don't hate that. That's really cool.
For example, we've been seeing in games like Dota and also other popular games a lot. If a hero has a very unique ability, a niche kind of speciality, then that's something that can really be interesting, tactically and strategically speaking.
Yeah. I have no idea if this would make something bad or weak or whatever, but I really like the way he's thinking here. So this should be applauded for sure, because when did you ever see someone suggest something like this? This is really fueling think tanks about patch notes, etc., thinking outside the box. Just like Razamoon came in yesterday or 2 days ago thinking that an attack point should be changed. Like 99% of all suggestions are cost and damage. That's it. Whether it's gold cost or mana cost for a spell, whatever, but it's very one-dimensional. So thinking the way Remo's thinking here can be very healthy.
Moving on. Orc, I touched on this earlier. Taurens are extremely underplayed. We basically never see them. In the patch, it was suggested that Pulverize could be reduced in lumber cost. I think that would change absolutely nothing. So I think rather having Tauren's gold cost reduced by 30, which would make much more of an impact, I would say. Another thing that's very underplayed is Burning Oil. Burning Oil on the Demolishers is supposed to be a strong upgrade on tier 3, but honestly, it's not that strong compared to Disease Cloud, and especially compared to Frag Shards. Burning Oil has very little effect, has very little damage. So I think a buff here across the board would make sense to make Burning Oil competitive among the tier 3 siege upgrades. So increase the damage, full damage from 12 to 14, increase the medium damage from 3 to 4. This means, I think, how close you are to the impact. And also the duration from...
Yeah, there's 3 different radiuses. Radii? I don't know what it's called. But yeah, that is exactly what it is.
2.5, 1 to 4 seconds. I think I suggested this before. Moving on to Undead. Dreadlord, as you can see, a lot of things I'm targeting here for my additional suggestions are things that address heroes and abilities that are underplayed. Taurens are underplayed, Burning Oil is underplayed, and so is the Dreadlord. Dreadlord is one of the weakest heroes in the game. I talked about this before. I think it's hard to perfectly buff the abilities of the Dreadlord. Because, first of all, the aura is almost useless for Undead, because you can't really play ghouls and A-bombs reliably in the late game. You have to go more with range.
The aura is insane for Gargs, though.
Because you have statues, you have fiends, you have destroyers. So, as good as the aura can be, the thing is the Undead can't really build an army around it. So I think the aura for the Dreadlord should just kind of be ignored when it comes to buffing him. And Sleep is an interesting spell, but we don't want to buff it too much because we don't want to incentivize a metagame where it's all about sleep surrounding and killing a hero, forcing the TP, surrounding him again, killing him again. It's very frustrating.
It could be similar to Entangle with the increased difficulty of then surrounding, but in general, I agree.
It's not very fun to play, so I think Sleep should be disregarded here as well. And lastly, Carrion Swarm is kind of good already. The only issue for the Dreadlord is he is mana locked. So if you have mana potions or, I don't know, statues or something, Carrion Swarm is very good. We don't want to overbuff it because it could really be a big problem in the late game, which is why I suggest buffing his stats. We saw that with the Panda, for example, a couple of patches back. The Panda received 1 bonus strength and 1 bonus intelligence, and that made him a lot better, especially on level 1, which is where the base stats matter the most, because percentage-wise speaking, it makes the most difference, logically. Dreadlord, increasing his strength, I don't think would suit him so much, because the Undeads already have the tank. That's the Crypt Lord. He's supposed to be the tank.
I'd argue that a DK is also pretty tanky.
He shouldn't be getting too much mana either, because the mana stress is important on the Dreadlord, I would say. And it wouldn't be very logical, I feel like, to just give him more intelligence. So I think giving him more agility would be kind of cool, because the Dreadlord is sort of supposed to be this vampire. He can also benefit from more right-click he's doing if he's getting more HP back through the aura. And if he gets more agility, that means he gets more attack speed and more armor. Not more damage, because he's a strength hero. So yeah, I think this...
Well, technically, he gets more damage because he has higher attack speed, just to put that out, so Twitch chat doesn't have to.
Would be quite nice. Plus 3 bonus stats sounds like a lot, but it's the attribute that does the least for him, unlike strength and intelligence would do.
I don't have a strong opinion on this.
And I think this would make him a lot more playable. Not OP, but more playable. Secondly, decrease Boneyard build time from 70 to 45 seconds.
That's a lot.
That would be a big time reduction, obviously. 25 seconds less for Boneyard build time would be a big deal when it comes to timing windows. And I think that's the big problem with Frostworms. They just take too long. You have to go tier 3 first, then you have to build the Boneyard, then you have to build the Frostworm. How long does that take in total? More than 2 minutes. It's too long. So I think, decreasing the Boneyard build time would help a lot, especially with that first Frostworm timing and perhaps the second Frostworm timing if you can start the next one right after. And that is, has the same intention as the Dreadlord buff, supposed to make the Frostworms playable while not making them overpowered, because at the moment they seem rather unplayable, with some very few exceptions.
That's also a problem with Chimeras, of course. I think Orc and Human have the advantage there. I always like when the races are not too streamlined, when there is differences. So it's kind of cool that the late game Orc and Human units are coming from buildings that you can already build, like the Rags for Knights, like the Aviary for Griffins, like the Tauren Totem for, obviously, Taurens. I wouldn't like this change. For example, you are able to build a Boneyard on tier 2 or something. That's kind of odd. Making them more accessible could be cool, but I don't know. Then we streamline everything a lot too. I would rather think of these units as the ultra late game edition, basically as a knockout punch, like a mothership or something. Maybe the unit should be stronger instead of that. So you keep the asymmetry between the races.
And what would be great help for Undead would be to give the Necromancer's Unholy Frenzy ability another perk. And that would be to give it a Dispel. I showed this in a suggestion video before. It can be done through triggers inside the Warcraft 3 editor that before one ability, another one can take place. That sounds a little bit complicated. What that means is, for example, you can compare it with Purge. Purge first has the root ability and then the Dispel. Or is it the other way around? Wait a minute. No, it first has the Dispel and then it has the root, where the unit is locked in place if it's an opponent.
Yes.
That could be done with Necromancer's Unholy Frenzy as well, where first, the target that you click it on gets dispelled, and then Unholy Frenzy gets applied to it. This would be a big deal for Undead, because of course Undead is the only race where only one source of dispel is available. And this would mean that they don't have to go tier 3 and destroyers first to have dispel, which is one of the reasons why Undead always has to go tier 3. Having an Unholy Frenzy perk additionally here, like I'm outlining, means that perhaps Undead tier 2 could be playable at some point. But that is, speculation. But yeah, this would certainly open up things strategically for the Undead race, and also give the Necromancer finally a role, and perhaps finally make him playable. Because throughout all of Warcraft 3 history, I assume that the Necromancer is the least played unit.
While I agree that from an Undead perspective that would be nice, it adds to the streamlining of races, and this is oftentimes an argument that I see in forums and stuff. All other races have this feature, my race needs it too. Like, that's not why we play Warcraft, really. It would be because our races have identity. That's why we rarely switch races. Most of us, I guess. So, could be cool. Would streamline it a little with Shaman from a diversity perspective. I don't like it too much, but it would certainly be interesting to see unfold in a game.
Necromancer and Mass Skeletons have their own set of issues, but I think that's not something we have to be worried about too much. Getting the Necro involved and included in the metagame would be interesting for all of Warcraft 3, and this, I think, would be one of the better ideas of trying to get to that point.
Adding to that the chance of this ability being bugged is fairly high.
All right, that's the 4 races done with. No, wait, I forgot about human. Sorry.
Oh, this adds to the anti-human campaigning. Back to Warcraft hates all the humans. They want humans to be erased from the game. Oil to the fire.
Human at the moment certainly still looks like the weakest of the 4 races. Doesn't really have a favorable matchup.
Here, once again, I agree. We clearly see this differently.
It seems like, I would say, human is 50-50 against Undead. Just slightly unfavored against Orc, but it's much better than it had been before, I would say. But also pretty clearly unfavored against Night Elf. That seems to be the biggest issue at the moment. But with the Arcane Tower buff and with the Immolation nerf, that's already being addressed a little bit. But I think human could need a bit more help. Mm-hmm. And, I suggested this change here before. It has almost become a meme by now. I would love still to see the Paladin movement speed increased.
I am not sure if am I understanding correctly that he's suggesting that these changes come on top of everything that's in 1.36? Yeah? Am I? Okay.
From 290 to 320. Archmage first is almost the only option for humans at the moment. And for first hero choices, movement speed is very, 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 very important. To be able to chase down kills, to be able to run away when you need, to be able to get in position when you need. Movement speed, very, very crucial, especially for a first hero. And this would, of course, be a big buff to the Paladin, which I think human could use. I'm not going to talk about it at length anymore. I've done so before.
Yep.
I'm not sure how many people agree with me on this, but I think it would be a big help.
I always and ever hated super strong paladins because I've been through a time where paladin harasses were a thing. Of course, since then a lot has changed, especially in undead base defenses. But similar to how I not want another keeper meta, I don't want another Dreadlord sleep meta, and I don't want paladin goes into Bubble and Holy Lights undead economy meta. Speaking that, as a little flavor added here and there, it can be kind of cool. But seeing this every single time, how a paladin rinse and repeats going into the undead economy, no. Yeah, I don't agree.
And secondly, I feel like defend could use a bit of a buff as well. Importantly, I don't think defend should be increased in its potency, in its...
I don't agree at all. At all.
Ability, because it already is strong when you have it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of damage reduction, a ton of damage reduction, in fact, against piercing damage, which human oftentimes needs. But getting to it in the first place can be difficult, especially on one base, because it's pretty expensive in resources. 150 gold and 100 lumber is a lot in the early game. And if it's easier to get to, I think this would help human, especially where they need it. Against Undead, we never really see defend being so important anymore, because it's mostly 2-base nowadays, and Lich and Ghouls, you know, all that stuff. And we never see human really go 1 base against Fiends anymore. So against Undead, this isn't so relevant, which I think is good, because the matchup seems to be pretty fair at the moment. But against Night Elf and Orc, this would help, certainly. Being able to get defend easier, maybe make a special build around it, get it faster, this would be a noticeable help, while it's not, you know, too strong, I would assume.
I think defend is one of the better upgrades in the game already. That is also accessible. Costs a little bit of more lumber, but otherwise basically the same as a footman. And it helps. It changes everything. It's one of these upgrades that changes absolutely everything. When you're up against Archer Fiends and Headhunters as well. And mind you, Immolation gets nerfed. Headhunters are getting nerfed. Undead, is there any... Okay, against Undead it wouldn't make any difference, I think. But this on top of all the other nerfs to other races seems pretty crazy to me.
Ahead of time.
Good suggestion by Ankis. I think it would be fine to nerf the cost while also nerfing the effectiveness. That's a whole different topic.
Yeah, so this should help out human where they need it against Orc and Night Elf, I think. Moving on to items.
Yeah. So, I said this in my patch video. I think if the patch goes through as it is, human will be a little evened out against Night Elf. Will definitely get a buff. I wonder if I'm forgetting something here, but will definitely be buffed against Orc, right? So I don't really think they need so much more. Hubert says, in my opinion, just shave off 5 to 10 seconds of research time and leave it. Same cost and strength. It is a cool moment in the game for a human if you have defend done, and I don't want to take that away at all. I'm not saying it's too strong or anything. And it should be nerfed. No, I'm not saying that at all, but I don't think it needs a heavy buff at all. In the whole broad picture of all the other changes.
Being partly addressed, and I talked about this a little bit already when we checked out the changes before.
Yep.
So, mana potion is being reduced from 250 to 200 mana. I agree with this.
Yep.
I think it also should go for the mana stone, like I said earlier. Additionally, I think from the same drop table of the mana stone, also the heal wards should be reduced from 3 to 2 charges. I forgot to enter that here. But yeah, I think that would also be prudent.
Point by Dondo, in addition to the last one, human might not necessarily be stronger versus Night Elf because the game is oftentimes lost because the Arcane Tower, before the Arcane Tower is up. That is something I certainly agree with, and that is why I'm advocating for a faster upgrade time for Arcane Towers instead of buffing the feedback.
One of mana ceiling change, I think ideally should be reverted. I think the 50 mana steal was fine on the wand. But if it's 60, I guess it's kind of okay. Additionally, sentry wards. I think sentry wards have way too much impact and have had for a long time. It gives you so much information, especially in the early game, especially during the first nighttime.
True.
Sentry wards are so incredibly good. We've seen plenty of sentry wards win games before, and they're just a little too good, I would say. So reducing the vision range from 1600 to 1000, I think, would make a lot of sense. Khadgar's Pipe of Insight, despite nerfs over the years, is still super strong. And since the other items, the other auras from the red camp were also nerfed, the Khadgar's Pipe seems like by far the best item at the moment, which is why I think it should be nerfed again from 0.5 mana to 0.4 mana.
Is this necessary still? It wouldn't hurt the balance. It would just be another negative sign of anti-power creep. It would make sense, probably. But I really dislike the feel of nerfing everything.
Per second.
Is the general consensus on items that they shouldn't win games? Yes, I think so. You don't want to win... especially on pro level, you don't want people to win just because they found one item that's lame.
Second. And also here I include that I think Gauntlets
you said
and
this before.
Mantle should have their stats reduced from +3 to +2. I explained that earlier, of course.
Yeah.
If the claws are weakened, then these kind of have to be weakened as well, because otherwise these items will be better than claws of attack +4, which would be pretty weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same
I
argument
talked about
here.
The circlet earlier as well. With 2/2/2, the circlet's going to be way better now than everything else from the drop table. So 2/1/1 with the 2 going to the main attribute, I think would make sense. Like I talked about earlier, this is going to have big ramifications for some heroes, especially Blade Master, Demon Hunter. But I think it would still be more healthy for the game overall if we evened out these items. And like I said, if we are unwilling to make this change, then at least increase the gold value of Circlet of Mobility. All right, we're almost through.
Nerfing item power level also means nerfing the importance to fight for creep camps, which is a bad thing in my opinion. That's a good point, though. That's something... I mean, it will still make a difference, but in general, yeah, you want to have strong rewards for camps you get and that are contested. It's still a plus, of course, if you get the item or not. It's still a power shift towards you if you win that fight. So maybe it's not the biggest deal.
True.
But it should feel rewarding. That's the thing.
Lastly, talking about the neutral heroes. Most neutral heroes nowadays see some play, but not much play. Especially the Firelord is the one hero who basically doesn't seem to have a role. Firelord tower pushes we used to see in the past, not so much anymore. Sometimes in Orgmira. In Orgmira, Firelord push is still relevant, especially when you play Headhunters versus Blade Master with the Farseer. But for the most part, he doesn't have a role, which is too bad. Firelord spells are all pretty crap. I talked about this ad nauseum before already.
He hates the Firelord's ability.
Who is a good right clicker, had more stat increase.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, I think we can go a bit crazy here.
A bit.
And just give him 3 agility per level. That's a lot. I realize this would give him quite strong agi scaling through the game. But I think it's something the Firelord could certainly use because, yeah, he's never played and his spells are all kind of trash. And he's hard countered by Dispel all the time. And
isn't the huge problem that he's super fragile and his abilities cover a lot but give no real power spike? All but 3 heroes get +6 stats per level. What Remo suggests is way off. Good point. Firelord is literally trash tier in terms of attribute distribution, but has 6 spells. I don't think so, to be honest. Incinerate on paper can be pretty cool, but it really isn't because it does take too long. Like on paper, it can be really strong, but you never get so many hits off that it actually works. Lava Spawn, in theory, if it's snowballing, ash balls or whatever. They're super expensive for the mana pool, and maybe here is where we agree. But yeah, Lava Spawn's easy to counter, and Soulburn, as much as I love to meme about it, can have a situational impact, but it's a little bit of damage over time. It's a little bit of silence. I think the damage mitigation is undervalued by people. I don't think the abilities are as bad as Remo makes them sound to, but they are really not that great in comparison to other heroes.
And lastly, the Alchemist Chemical Rage. It's a 30-second cooldown for only 15-second uptime. I think it's too little. I think it's just kind of weak. Acid Bomb is a decent spell. Heal Spray is a decent spell. Of course, his ultimate Transmute is incredible. But yeah, this Chemical Rage, it's just kind of bad. It's just kind of weak.
I think that would be pretty good. You will damn this buff if the Alchemist keeps chasing you. That's a lot of time. I think the Alchemist in general is fine, except the ultimate that is almost a little too strong, but fun. Is it fun though? It's not a fun interaction. I don't think it's needed.
So I think having the duration increase from 15 to 20 seconds would help as well. All right, and that's it. I was trying to see how a quicker version of this update would go. Normally, I keep talking about this stuff for hours, but today I wanted to make it a bit snappy. We'll see if Blizzard does an updated version of the PTR. Oftentimes, they first throw out suggestions for the PTR, and they wait for feedback, and then an iterated version will come out maybe a week later, maybe a couple of days later. If that is the case, if an updated version will be posted by Blizzard again, I'm going to do another one of these videos.
Yoo-hoo! And we will react to it.
Happy to give my feedback. To all of you watching out there, by the way, I also encourage everyone to give your feedback as well.
Yes.
In the YouTube comments or on Reddit or in the forum. Or if you are a content creator, I also would love to see some more feedback videos from you guys.
Or if you're a player, make a video or make a paper or react to us. Tell us how stupid we are in suggesting some of these things and tell us why. Because I see so much of, oh, they have no idea what they're talking about. This is ludicrous. This is bonkers. But this always stays at this. And maybe it's a line in the Discord. Nobody sees your lines in the Discord. Put it out there. Put it out there. Tag me if you want. I don't care. I want to hear when I'm wrong. And I want to hear why I'm wrong. Or why Remo is wrong. Or why the people behind this patch are wrong. Just do it. I saw posts by Don Dolare, for example. Really good posts with a lot of thought behind it. I like that a lot. Yeah, I just want to hear from more people about such stuff. Because it's super easy to complain afterwards. The easiest. Not that easy to come up with stuff yourself or give a reason. Like, we complain, Blizzard or Playside, they just put the changes out there, they don't explain, and then we criticize them, but a lot of people don't explain why they criticize it. So be better.
Yeah, because, you know, these are just my suggestions. I'm just one of many, and I certainly am by no means perfect.
Exactly.
Like I said earlier,
nobody is.
I have been wrong in the past, and I'm sure I'll be wrong again.
Me too.
But yeah, I would say for the most part, these look like good changes. And I explained where I slightly disagree And yeah, I think that's it, right? Is there anything we missed? There's also some ranked and observer mode changes, but I don't really care about those. So, yeah. All good. And with that, I say goodbye. 40 minutes. That's a good time. Yeah. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all again for listening to me ramble. I'm sure I'm going to be back here doing another one of these soon. And until then, I'll see you soon on the stream. I wish
Bye,
you
Remo.
a very pleasant day, whichever one it is for you. For me,
Say-
Saturday.
Say bye to Remo, everybody.
Take care, guys, and have a good one.